There are stories that remain hidden for years, stories that even the brightest spotlight cannot reach. Can Yaman has been on stage, in front of millions, adored by fans across the world. His smile has charmed entire nations, his roles have captured hearts from Istanbul to Rome, from Madrid to Los Angeles. But behind the carefully crafted image of a man who seems invincible, behind the camera flashes and red carpets, lies another story, one written not for the world, not for the press, not even for his closest friends. It was written only for himself, in the silence of the night, with nothing but ink, paper, and a heart that needed to speak. This story begins not with applause, not with success, but with loneliness. It was during a time when his days were filled with interviews, rehearsals, endless filming schedules, and the kind of fame that feels like both a blessing and a curse. People saw the man who smiled in front of cameras, but few ever saw the man who returned home after midnight, placed his phone face down on the table, and opened a leather-bound diary that carried the weight of truths he couldn't share. The diary itself was unassuming, worn, almost ordinary. Its brown cover carried tiny scratches, reminders of being carried around in suitcases from one hotel room to another. But the words inside were anything but ordinary. They were confessions, regrets, memories, and emotions so raw that they could break even the strongest image he had built in the public eye. And among these pages, there was one recurring name. A name written with hesitation at first, as though even on paper it was dangerous to admit. Then later, with urgency, with passion, with heartbreak. That name was Demet. The world knew them as co-stars, as two people whose chemistry on screen was so powerful that it blurred the lines between fiction and reality. Fans speculated, magazines published endless rumors, and paparazzi waited outside cafes just for a glimpse of them together. But what no one truly knew was what Can himself confessed in those late-night diary entries, that something real had happened, something that both lifted him higher than ever before and left him broken in ways he could never show. One page, dated on a rainy evening in Istanbul, reads almost like a letter he never sent. I told myself it was just work. That every smile, every glance, was part of the script. But how do you explain the silence after everyone leaves, and it's just us, and it feels like the world doesn't exist? I never wanted to admit it, not to her, not to the world, not even to myself. But it's here, written in my own hand. I loved her. I still do. The diary revealed not just love but fear. Fear of what the world would say. Fear of what fame could destroy. Fear of opening his heart and losing everything he had worked so hard to build. Yet, page after page, his words became less about fear and more about surrender, like a man who could no longer fight the truth he carried inside. He wrote about the night they sat on a hotel balcony, hours after filming, watching the city lights shimmer on the Bosphorus. The way she laughed when the wind tangled her hair. The way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention. He wrote, "That was the night I realized I was already too far gone. That if she walked away tomorrow, I would never be the same again." But diaries are not just for love, they are also for pain. And as the months passed, the words turned darker, heavier. He began writing about silence, her silence. About unanswered calls, about doors that never opened, about nights when he stood outside, hoping for a chance to explain what couldn't be explained. The diary became a witness to his heartbreak, a place where he could put the tears he refused to show to anyone else. One line, underlined twice as though it was a truth that cut too deeply, simply read, "The call I never returned changed everything." What was that call? Why didn't he answer? What truth was hidden behind those few words? The answer was buried within those pages, waiting to be uncovered. But before that revelation, there were more memories, more confessions. He wrote about the way success began to feel hollow without someone to share it with. He wrote about red carpets where the applause felt like thunder, but the silence afterward was unbearable. He wrote about searching for her face in every crowd, every city, even when he knew she wouldn't be there. And then, one entry stood out from all the rest, longer, more detailed, written in shaky handwriting as though the weight of the words almost crushed him. It was the night he admitted to himself that he had lost her, not just as a lover, but as the one person who truly understood him. They think I'm strong. They think I don't need anyone. But the truth is, I needed her. I needed her more than I ever admitted. And I was too proud, too scared, to say it out loud. Now it's too late. The world sees a man who is everything, but in these pages, the truth is written, I am alone. And yet, even in the depths of his pain, there was hope. Hope that one day, maybe years later, these words would not remain hidden. That someone would understand the story behind the man, beyond the fame, beyond the headlines. That someone would finally read the truth in his own handwriting. That time is now. And for the first time, the truth Can Yaman wrote in his diary is revealed. The diary was not written in perfect order. Some pages were dated, some weren't. Some were scribbled in a rush, as if he had grabbed the pen just to release the weight inside him before it crushed him. Others were written slowly, carefully, each word chosen like it was too precious to be wasted. But in every line, there was honesty. Brutal, unfiltered honesty that Can Yaman never allowed himself to show outside of those pages. One entry began with just 3 words, I miss her. It was so simple, yet it carried the kind of weight only a man who has lived through unforgettable love can understand. He wasn't missing a co-star, or a friend, or just a chapter of his life. He was missing the woman who had been at the center of his most genuine emotions, the one who had blurred the line between acting and reality until he could no longer tell where the role ended and his own heart began. The more he wrote, the clearer it became, the screen had given them excuses to stay close, to look into each other's eyes longer than strangers ever could, to speak words of love that the world thought were scripted but felt too real to be fiction. And when the camera stopped rolling, the silence between them said more than 1,000 lines of dialogue ever could. But then, slowly, that silence grew heavier. It became the silence of unanswered messages, of postponed conversations, of doors closing one by one. I saw her smile that night, but it wasn't for me, one line read. It was for someone else, and in that moment I realized how invisible I had become in her world. The diary painted the picture of a man torn between 2 worlds, the one where he was adored by millions, and the one where he felt forgotten by the only person who truly mattered. And within those torn pages, one recurring regret kept appearing, the call. He wrote about it multiple times, always circling back to the same moment, as if replaying it in his head again and again, trying to rewrite history with ink when life had already moved on. She called me that night, he confessed in one entry. I remember the phone buzzing on the table. I saw her name. I froze. I told myself I'd call back later, when I was ready, when I knew what to say. But I never did. I don't know if I was afraid of what I'd hear, or if I thought silence would protect me from more pain. But that silence became my biggest mistake. It wasn't just a missed call. To him, it was the turning point. The moment that could have changed everything, but instead sealed the fate of their story. He admitted that he picked up the phone several times afterward, scrolling through their old messages, staring at her name on the screen, his thumb hovering over the call button, but never pressing it. Pride held him back. Fear held him back. And by the time he found the courage, it was too late. He wrote about standing outside her door once, late at night, the phone in his hand, ready to explain everything. But he never knocked. He just stood there, reading her name written in his diary instead of saying it out loud. If I had answered that call, he wrote in another entry, maybe today we'd have a different story. Maybe we'd be together. Maybe we'd be happy. Instead, we're 2 people pretending to have moved on, while the truth still burns inside me. The diary was not just a confession, it was a battlefield. Every page carried the war between his heart and his mind. His heart wanted to surrender, to admit everything, to fight for her no matter the cost. His mind told him it was impossible, that the world was watching, that love was too fragile under the weight of fame. And yet, in the quietest lines, when his guard was completely down, he wrote about the moments he couldn't forget, the way her hand felt when it brushed against his, the way her eyes lingered on him when no one else was watching, the way silence between them sometimes felt louder than words. She is the unfinished sentence in my story, one haunting line read. No matter how many chapters one write, she is the one I never managed to close. As the years passed, his diary entries became less frequent, but no less powerful. In Rome, in Madrid, in hotel rooms across Europe, he still carried the same worn notebook, still added fragments of truth when the loneliness became too much. Fame followed him everywhere, but the shadow of that call never left. "I can have everything," he wrote in Italy, "and yet without her, it feels like nothing." They see Can Yaman, the actor, the star. They don't see the man who still waits for a call that will never come. And it was this contrast, the public image of a man who had it all, and the private truth of a man haunted by what he had lost, that made the diary not just a collection of words, but a confession so raw, so unguarded, that it redefined everything people thought they knew about him. But perhaps the most shocking revelation came not in words of love or regret, but in the moment he admitted the truth that fans had always suspected but never truly known: "I never stopped loving her. Not for a day, not for a moment. And if my silence destroyed us, then these pages are my punishment, because they remind me every night of what I chose to lose." And with that, the diary stopped being just his secret, it became his legacy. The truth written not for the cameras, not for the world, but for the one person he could never let go. When Can moved to Italy, it seemed like a new chapter. To the world, it was a dream, the Turkish star conquering Europe, adored in Rome, chased by cameras in Milan, welcomed by fans at every airport. Headlines called him the man of the moment, the actor who had broken cultural barriers. Yet, in the privacy of hotel rooms where the applause could not reach, his diary told a different story. He wrote about walking through the streets of Rome at night, surrounded by beauty but feeling incomplete. The lights of Piazza di Spagna glowed, couples laughed in the late summer air, and yet he found himself alone, carrying that same leather-bound notebook in his jacket pocket. "Italy gave me everything I thought I wanted," one entry read. "But it also showed me everything I had lost. Every church bell, every cafe, every corner of this city whispers her name, even when she is nowhere near." He admitted that sometimes, during interviews in Italian, when journalists asked about love, his smile was his mask. The words that followed were rehearsed, safe, the kind of answers that revealed nothing. But the diary carried the truth he never said out loud: "They ask about love. I want to say her name. But I don't. I can't. I protect her even from myself." As time passed, new rumors surrounded him, stories of other women, fleeting romances, public appearances that sparked endless speculation. Yet, even in those moments, his pen confessed otherwise. "They see me with someone else," he wrote, "but my heart is never there. It is still where I left it, with her. Every smile I give is an echo, every touch a shadow. None of it feels real, because the truth is still written in these pages." His diary described nights when he would sit by the window of his apartment in Rome, the city glowing beneath him, and open the same page again and again, the one where her name was written. The ink had faded slightly, smudged by time and fingerprints, but the memory never faded. And then came the entry that shook even him as he wrote it, a confession not just of love, but of regret so deep it nearly swallowed him. "I once believed success could heal everything. That if I reached the top, if I built a career that no one could ignore, I would forget the pain. But the truth is, success has only made the silence louder. Every award, every applause, is followed by the same emptiness. Because none of it can replace her voice." The diary was no longer just a companion, it had become his prison. He returned to it like a wound that never healed, reopening it again and again, knowing it would hurt, but unable to stop. The final pages of the diary were different. The handwriting was slower, more deliberate, as though he knew these words would matter more than any before. And perhaps they did, because in those final entries, Can Yaman stripped away even the last layer of armor and spoke with complete vulnerability. "If you are reading this," one entry began, "then the truth has finally found its way out. I don't know when, I don't know how, but maybe it is time the world knows not the actor, not the man on screen, but the man who loved and lost." He confessed that the call he never returned haunted him more than any mistake of his life. That in the silence of that moment, he had lost the chance to rewrite their story. That every page since then had been an attempt to talk to her when his voice failed him. I was afraid. Afraid that if I answered, I would hear goodbye. And now I realize that by not answering, I created that goodbye myself. The last words in his diary, written with trembling ink, were not about fame, not about the career he built, not about the image the world knew. They were about her. About the truth that he had carried for years, in silence, in secret. The truth is simple: I never stopped loving her. And maybe I never will. If my life is a story, then she is the chapter one will keep rereading until the last page. This diary is my witness, my confession, and my punishment. The truth is here, and now it is no longer mine alone. And with that, the diary ended. A silence heavier than words followed, the kind of silence that doesn't close a story, but leaves it lingering, alive, in the hearts of those who finally read it. The world may know Can Yaman as the actor, the star, the man who conquered screens and nations. But his diary reveals something far more powerful: the man who, despite everything, remained human. Vulnerable. Loving. Regretful. And above all, true. Because in the end, the greatest role he ever played was the one the world never saw. And the truth, finally revealed, was written not on a script, not on a screen, but in the quiet, fragile pages of a diary that held his heart.